Hello, hello, everybody. Hope everyone's doing good. So, let's get right into it. Zionists are Nazis, and Nazis are Zionists. It only takes a few letters swapped around. And that isn't some absurd upsell of the situation. That's reality. I don't want to hear about Yahweh unless it's from the true Jews, the black Hebrew Israelites of Beta Israel. That's right! That makes me think. Since OG Israel was destroyed, and Simeon is Beta Israel in Ethiopia, modern Israel is tertiary Israel. Kind of like tertiary syphilis, if you know what I mean. But for real, I am very happy the warmongers and feds and slavers and opiate merchants didn't get their way. Trump really saved a lot of innocent lives, American, Israeli, Jewish, Christian, atheist, Muslim, Iranian. He saved a lot of lives. Only when you've heard the wails of a mother holding her dead infant do you know the value of peace. Unless you're Randy Fine, in which case you actually start busting out the lotion as soon as you hear that. My mind has been swimming in simulation all day, all yesterday, and I must say, Trump might have saved the world. I see many evangelicals opening their eyes for the first time. They're waking up to the reality that they've been fooled for all this time. I swear I've seen it a bunch recently, and we're going to get into that at the end of this episode. Just a little bit more. And Trump might have saved the world and the human race. And I think it was the beautiful Queen Melania that acted as the muse to his braver natures. That was just something that I had suspected could be happening because she was legitimately harmed by these sex trafficking organizations that Trump saved her from. He literally saved the princess. And in so doing, he just slayed the dragon. How you slay the dragon? I said this when the Ukraine-Russia war broke out. You love your brother. That's how you slay the dragon. All the Ukrainians just loved their brothers and said, "You're an Orthodox nation. I will not fight you." Nobody had to die. Nobody had to die. Things would have been all right. Instead, it's a horrible pitched war, and then there's internal conflict all throughout Ukraine, where the goons that get to avoid going into the meat grinder then beat people in the streets and kidnap people and destroy churches. That's what's going on in Ukraine. Meanwhile, what do you see? Russia trying to do the right thing and trying to do the right thing and trying to do the right thing and trying to do the right thing. You know, when it comes to stuff like with the Chechens, it's complicated. But in the Middle East, they're the good guys. And that's hard for some people to understand because they really do think that America is what America says it is on the surface level and that it's a Christian nation and stuff like that. But it really has some issues, and those issues come with the fact that Freemasons were very, very involved in the founding of our nation. And in 1779, 3 years after our country was created, the French did the revolution, the Masonic revolution of the Jacobins. And we have a lot of issues stemming from this manipulation, the manipulation of religion, the manipulation of evangelicals who trace back to, you know, John the Evangelist and like all of the crazy stuff around him. You know, it's complex because John naturally was a very, very interesting person, but like I personally, this is my personal beliefs, I could be wrong. I think that his works were adulterated. I think that they were adulterated. I think that they were abridged. I think that people were writing in between the lines there, and things were being changed. And because see, this is what's beautiful about your down-to-earth, good, simple Protestants. Is they know Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You know, they're the four male children. You know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The four Gospels. There is a guy named his YouTube channel is pretty close to like biblical investigations. It's like kind of like a crime scene investigation. It's like a guy who used to do like crime scene investigations and detective work who's applying that to the Bible, and he found out that the four Gospels confirm each other in such a way that it's like four different people telling the same story. If it's four people telling the same telling a story that they all convened with each other and decided, wouldn't be any differences, only little minor differences, mistakes in memory. But there are different interpretations of the exact same story that come out the exact same way, and it confirms the Gospels to be true. God bless the United States. God bless our president. God bless Christianity. God save Trump, and Trump honored that a few days ago. Will it hold? Time will tell. I think it will. But as I said last episode, regardless of what happens, we have quite literally entered into a new, significantly brighter chapter of world history. You know, I wrote up a whole mess of mean stuff I was going to say about it all, but whether true or false, most of it was true. Confirmed. Being cruel is not Christian and would only sink me down to his pathetic little level. No, I will continue to pray for him. Like I have for years. I will continue to beg God, Christ, and Mary to intercede on behalf of his better natures. Saint Michael the Archangel to slay the many, many demons that have lived in his heart for decades. That grooming victim. Ultimately, that grooming victim is a brother, not an enemy. And I refuse to fetishize our differences or what higher ground I hold morally. That's wrong. You know, I meditated on it a lot yesterday. Just so you know, whenever you do good things, that echoes into the future in many directions. And when you do bad, it has the same effect, like a stone in a pond. It ripples out, it bounces around. It is not destroyed as it hits the side of the pond. It bounces around for a while in unpredictable ways. To be zen, to have inner peace, is to operate in the flow of the universe, the Tao, as the Asians would call it, allowing the water to smooth the contours of your ego till you feel no disruption as you operate in this world. You'll never have a nightmare. Did Turkey Tom seriously just drop a video associating Ted Kaczynski with Dylan Roof? Man, the sector sucks. No offense, but the mindset that everything is permissible is not the way to eliminate that friction. If you don't know already, Uncle Ted only targeted scientists, and it's entirely likely that Flight 444 was not him. He never expressed a fondness for gematria. But what he was aware of was the nascent transgender ideology, bloodily crafted by the quack Dr. John Money. He was aware of the birth of the internet and the computer scientists working on that project. He had been inflicted trauma deliberately as part of the college MK Ultra program where they dosed people with LSD, then humiliated everyone in the course round robin. He was targeting scientists, when scientists and doctors were becoming the new demigods through our theosophical society in the 60s, shoehorned into American life. The same faulty scientism that would lead to the creation of monsters like Fauci. They need to be brought back down to earth. In many ways, Iran just did this to Tel Aviv and the Zionists. They now know they are not untouchable. Their scientism will not save them. In fact, as many people have been saying, the more electronic and non-mechanical, the more cloud-based your systems become, the more options, the more failure points it is for it to fall. Just saying. Thomas Massey is such a down-to-earth, personable, charming nerd. He's a genuinely good person, and the exact synthesis of humble and smart that made America great. I hope he and Trump become friends again soon. Also, Randy Fine, my Congress turd, was caught paying the blood tribe Nazis to protest here, to give himself a little bit of extra boost when he says, anti-Semitism, 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 while praising people for blowing up children. So if you're still on the fence about Nazism, keep in mind, the entire neo-Nazi scene is paid off from the top. They aren't fighting a defensive battle against all odds like the Germans in World War I. They are feds and they are actors. That's simple. Don't get caught up in that, for real. It's always crazy to hear a white boy speak fluent Arabic, absolutely karate chopping those vocal cords. Here's a word: eschatology. Eschatology is the study of the end times and how they will come about through the examination of various translations and interpretations of Abrahamic scripture. A lot of Zoroastrians and Jews were very obsessed with the apocalypse. And then, you got John, it's just, I see all these things, and then I remember what the Talmudists regard as their Messiah, and I go, wait just a minute. Christ never left us. He lives in the heart of the faithful. We continue to summon forth every single time a true mass is said Christ's essence and honor his sacrifice. He's not going to come back on a Pegasus with a flaming sword like he's the emperor of mankind. That's not going to happen. The emperor of mankind himself is derived from apocalyptic Judaism. But he's sitting on the throne. He's dead. Well, not really, but he's like 9/10 dead. That's insane. And Gulliman is about doing the right thing, straight up. You got the 19th Legion, you got Kovers Corax, you got Rabute Gilliman. They're about doing the right thing, And it just shows, all of these liars, deceivers, they're the bad guys. Whether or not they turn into ascended Daemon Prince Holden Bloodfeast or not, that's not something to venerate. And the fact that anybody is just like, yeah, Korn, yeah, Slanesh, yeah, Nurgle. I mean, I could kind of understand the people being okay with Tzeentch and Alpha Legion stuff. That's more on the cusp. But anybody to be super, super deep into the more degenerate factors of chaos and apply that to the real world. Oh, geez. I mean, we have these lessons, they're written down, and the play is there. We're not all just actors. These are archetypal things that continue the spirits that haunt humanity and take new vessels to allow yourself to become a vessel for the worst part of the supernatural. To allow yourself to become the most devilish preternatural manifestation as you possibly can. I don't understand how anybody can be proud of that, other than the fact that pride is indeed a sin in and of itself. Unfortunately, you will rarely ever find a practitioner of the study whose mind even attempts to approach the mysteries of God's will and the grandeur of God's plan. Even more unfortunate, they often override Christ's own words. One can see how early church politicians and financiers would twist Christ's words to allow for things like crusades and taking singular passages so far out of context that the universality of his preaching is alchemically boiled down to a biased excuse for bad behavior. You can do anything you want because you're forgiven. Yeah, right. That's not true. I've heard Protestants preach this passionately in the past, but Christ's sacrifice redeemed the fall of Adam with Mary as the new Eve. That redeems our past, not our future. More and more we see Christians repeating the same mistakes pagans, and I'm using the colloquial, non-Abrahamic qualifying definition of the word here, religions have done over and over again, dating back to time immemorial. This belief in either a great universal rapture or a giving way to a sort of Kali Yuga, these transitional inclinations are often disposed to great acts of violence. You can actually look, Mecca, 1890, what the heck was going on there? Some very bad things, internal civil strife committed by people who thought the end times was upon us. Well, obviously it wasn't, but it was for some people, at least the people that they killed. Jim Jones was playing out an ancient archetype. Hindus, Zoroastrians, Zodiac adherents, Jews, Muslims, Christians, all have fallen for this misinterpretation of mortal wisdom. That the end days is indeed nigh. Those more pragmatic actors, however, groping towards the laws of the universe through Nacian scientific method in these Chinese and German alchemists and their quest for immortality, fountains of youth. It's a denial of this truth, same as those believing their bodies will be raptured. Different degrees of this failure of understanding. I think a big reason why people love groping at the peripheries of mortalities with adrenaline junkie behavior, fighting, racing, etc., is because they know something's there but haven't discovered it yet. I maintain it's the very bell curve behavior, as the simpler would simply not risk their lives for a cheap thrill, and the more complex oftentimes have discovered what actually lies on the other side of that line people dance around. I can say on this issue, I am the latter. And indeed, there is no sense in risky behavior. IQs, flat plane. You can apply them to a variety of different things. In this issue, I am above the bell curve. When people finally reach this understanding, they usually go off and have a kid. Start caring for their families more, But to be stuck in that 100 IQ zone on this issue is to always have your eyes rolling into the back of your head as you push the limits of comfort while going, "Oh man, I feel so alive!" Not realizing that the limits of your comfort is a parameter of wisdom, not an envelope of indulgence to push. And naturally, you push that button enough times, it'll stop meaning anything and you'll have to seek riskier and riskier behavior. And for fighting, it's even lower. But the two are connected. I think the pipeline goes pretty succinctly like this. Risky driving leads to fighting, leads to gambling, leads to drug addiction, because the dragon you're chasing will get farther and farther and farther away, and you won't be able to catch it without upping the ante. And you might ask, I can see how fighting leads to gambling because of the brain damage, and how that dopamine mess can lead to drug addiction, but how do you get from cars to fighting? I've known people who've raced for 20 years and never fought anyone. Fair point, fair point. But I put that as a first base because it's essentially a gateway drug to more risky behaviors inside of a country with car-dependent infrastructure, a sort of system that we've actually forced on the third world repeatedly. And that then goes down a pre-prescribed line with billions and billions and billions of dollars put into it. And then comes the sports betting. Different countries have different lines, but this is ours, and it's one of the worst lines on the planet. Fair warning. Doron Mamdani won the primary against the grandma-killing Italian rapist Cuomo. Cuomo is a Swiss-Italian name, by the way. Good riddance. And you know what? I really don't like Adams. I'm not a fan of Clown World. I don't care how funny he is. He is comically corrupt, and I don't find that to be very funny. And I am very much dreading the immigrants that'll be coming from New York down here, because the ones that have already come here have been awful, and I've been hearing the ones that want to come here if Zoran wins, and they're terrible people. I hope they're all cordoned off into New Jersey, but I know for a fact that our demoniac governor who loves to torture people and see people suffer and be pro-slavery and be pro-Israel, this monster in the governor's mansion, has been inviting all of these Italian rapists and Satanists and mafiosos into our state as long as they can, at least on the surface, pretend to not be demoniacs. Like Andrew Tate is like open about it, and so he has to go. Mainly because he converted to Islam. If he didn't convert to Islam and he wasn't super loud about it, he would have been welcomed in Florida under DeSantis' Florida, 100%. I've unfortunately already seen a lot of people on the right saying, nuke New York City, And I've said that about Los Angeles. But, to be honest, I kind of regret it. The problems our country is suffering from is a globalized and decentralized network of financial, military, and political hegemony. Taking out big cities would only cause the next biggest cities that weren't touched to turn into the new home for this ever-metastasizing cancer. Just never building cities is actually one way of keeping these people out. Big cities and the resources they can pool into their police forces, receiving military surplus and inviting the most violent police officers kicked out for abusing rural communities. But if that didn't exist, if everybody was armed and the police would turn their heads away, if the torches and pitchforks were brought to the manners of the ones running the child sex trafficking rings and other demoniac things our country is plagued with, well, then we'd be in a different place. But when you peel through the history, one of the things that got the New England Puritans to harbor such intensely evil spirits is the misdirection. The King James Bible, King James demonology that painted these vapors that float from soul to soul as a sort of fey creature in physical form, that a witch was a different type of human being with different physical properties, not just a person who runs the gamut from dabbling with herbs to brewing full-blown toxins. Alchemists were always around, but mostly the Normans burned witches in the ancient European world, and the Normans had a lot of Gnostic, Hermetical, Middle Eastern influence. So do the Bohemians. All of these poorly translated interpretations of the synthesis of pagan and Christian theology that took place on the peripheries of Christendom turned the nascent Anglican and Protestant faiths into perfect vessels for Freemasonic ideals as well. Ideas that carried Canaanite human sacrifice into the modern era. Also important to note how Pope Innocent III burned the Cathars of the Languedoc at the stake. I fingered that as evil for a very, very long time. Many, many, many years. And it was. This was likely the foundation of the Inquisition as a satanic entity that extracted false confessions, although often being painted in pop cultures as worse than it actually was. There were horrific things that took place in those dungeons. They attempted to recreate a version of hell on earth, which is pretending to play God, which is vainglorious, which is blasphemous, and in violation of holy law. But the Salem witch trials weren't something the Spanish were doing. It was Puritans with their disgust sensitivity dialed up to 11. And I also find it fascinating that Hitler viewed Manifest Destiny as an inspiration for his blitzkrieg. I also find it fascinating that Hitler viewed, that's in Mein Kampf, so if you don't believe me, look it up. And how Nazis used disgust sensitivity to divide and conquer the races. Funny to find out that there's a chain message to micro-celebrities offering to pay people to slander Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, but the letter from Rabbi Shlomo misspelled it as Candace Owen, and a lot of people are out there talking trash about Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen. Pretty funny. Pretty funny. I heard a clip of a pastor do the exact same thing as the TikTok influencer. It was really fascinating stuff. And it blew my mind truly because last night, my friend told me his pastor had been trash talking Tucker out of nowhere, and he didn't buy it, even though he respects his pastor. Then we had a nice little talk about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, about Moses, about Solomon and the Pharisees, and how Christ entered the entire human race into the covenant of the Lord, and how Israel is the living body of the faithful, and how the real third temple is within you. I think we're witnessing a new dawn. Pretty soon, the only Christian Zionists left will be the charlatans and parasites like Josh Moon and Ronald DeSantis. The Novus Ordo Catholics who tithe to a massive child sex trafficking organization while worshiping its Israeli operators. And with that thought, I'll leave you off for today. Hope everybody has a good one and stays cool, because this heat wave is quite intense. Alright, y'all. Cheers.